He had a master key to every door in the school, but no one ever asked what doors he kept locked inside himself. There are people who pass through life like shadows on a sunny wall, always there, always quiet, but rarely noticed. At Jefferson High, nestled in a suburban district that hadn't changed much since the 70s, Mr. Elroy was one of those people. To the students, he was just the janitor, not Mr. Elroy, not Sir, just the janitor. Tall, lanky, and a little hunched, he walked as if he were permanently dodging attention. His grey uniform, always the same, had patches at the elbows, worn knees, and the faint scent of bleach and old paper. His cap sat low on his forehead, shielding his eyes as if he wanted to see but not be seen. His name tag had faded long ago, the letters ghosted into the fabric. He didn't speak unless necessary, and when he did, it was in clipped words, almost whispers. Some students joked that he was part ghost, but the truth is, he was always there. Every morning, before the sun had fully risen, the hall lights would blink on one by one, humming like insects. Somewhere between the third and fourth light flicker, Mr. Elroy would appear. He pushed a battered mop bucket whose wheels creaked against the linoleum, a sound that somehow became part of the school's morning rhythm, like birdsong or the hum of vending machines. He cleaned without being asked. He repaired without being thanked. He existed without being acknowledged. Teachers passed by him with half smiles. Students barely glanced. He wasn't part of the school's memory. He was part of its furniture. But he noticed everything. He remembered the names of students who dropped their lunch trays and helped them without a word. He taped up torn posters instead of throwing them away. He fed the stray cat behind the gym, the one no one believed existed until it died, and he quietly buried it by the maple tree near the south exit. Some nights, long after the final bell had echoed into silence, he would sit alone on the bleachers of the gymnasium, not cleaning, just sitting, watching the painted lines on the court like they held answers no one else could see. He carried a ring of keys the size of a fist. They jingled with his every step, hundreds of doors at his mercy, and yet he never unlocked anything that wasn't his. Students whispered rumors. He used to be in jail. He sleeps in the basement. He's hiding from someone. But no one ever asked him directly, because why ask a man who didn't exist? In the main hallway across from the library stood an old trophy case. Its glass hadn't been polished in years. Most people walked past it without noticing. But Elroy, he'd stop, almost daily, just for a few seconds. He'd stare at a photo in the far back, a black and white image nearly faded to white. No one knew who the people in it were. The paper had yellowed. Time had erased the names. But he'd stand there, unmoving, as if waiting for someone in the photo to blink. Only once did someone speak to him during one of those moments. A sophomore named Lily Henders, late for detention, paused beside him and glanced at the photo. "You know them?" she asked, without expecting a real answer. He didn't look at her. He just said softly, "One of them saved my life." Then he turned and walked away. She never forgot it, but she never brought it up again. His only known possession in the teacher's lounge was a small, dented metal drawer marked Elroy. Inside, a black notebook filled with handwriting so neat it looked printed. A photo of a woman in military uniform, mid-30s, unsmiling, proud. A chewed-up blue pen with the initials WC carved into the plastic. No one asked about it. No one touched it. Because no one thought to wonder who he was when he wasn't cleaning up after them. Years went by like pages turning. Freshmen became seniors. Teachers transferred or retired, but Elroy stayed. And then, one day, he didn't. A Monday morning in early spring, the school lights flickered on. The halls waited, but the mop never squeaked. The keys never jingled. By third period, the front office began making calls. By 6th, it was announced over the speaker in the calmest voice they could manage. "We're saddened to inform you that Mr. Elroy has passed away. He was with the school for many years. No cause was given, no obituary followed, no family came to claim his belongings. Some students made jokes. Some teachers offered polite condolences in the break room, and just like that, he was gone, just as quietly as he had lived." But what no one realized yet was that Mr. Elroy had left something behind. Something that would unlock every door people had ignored. Something that would rewrite how everyone remembered him. Sometimes, the strangest clues are the ones hidden in plain sight, in the way someone folds a paper or how they stare just a little too long at a locked door. In the days following Mr. Elroy's death, the school slipped into a strange stillness. Not because people mourned him loudly, but because his absence felt wrong. Not loud, not tragic, just wrong. Like a chair missing from a familiar corner, like a light bulb quietly burned out. At first, it was the small things. The hallway outside room 14 was sticky with spilled juice no one cleaned. The locker door that never quite closed began hanging open again. The coffee machine in the teacher's lounge buzzed, but didn't heat. It was as if the building itself had noticed he was gone, but it wasn't until people began to talk, quietly in passing, that the oddities surrounding Mr. Elroy started to surface. "You ever see him use a phone?" That was the first question. Coach Daniels asked it while leaning on the vending machine. No one had. He never typed, never texted, never even held a phone. Mrs. Levitt, the biology teacher, chimed in. "He didn't have an email in the staff directory. I once asked the admin why, and she said he declined it." Declined email. In 2023, then someone else remembered something else. He didn't sign his name on the supply request sheets. His handwriting looked like calligraphy. I saw him reading once. Not a phone, a book, some kind of leather-bound journal. The stories began adding up. He didn't use technology. He didn't engage in small talk. He didn't seem curious about the outside world. But he watched everything around him with an intensity that now seemed deliberate. A former student named James Alvarez, now in college, posted something on Instagram a few days after Elroy's passing. A blurry photo from senior year. In it, Elroy was barely visible, sitting in the far background of a pep rally, eyes locked on the gym doors. James captioned it. "Didn't realize until now, he always sat near exits, never in the middle of a crowd." That triggered a flood of similar observations. Students recalled how he always positioned himself with his back to the wall, how he knew which lockers had faulty latches without ever opening them, how he once redirected a group of students away from a stairwell, 5 minutes before a pipe burst and flooded the area. At the time, people had laughed it off. "Janitor instincts," they joked. Now it felt different. The school's security footage only went back 60 days. But when reviewed by the assistant principal, it revealed something else. Mr. Elroy had routines, strict ones. At exactly 4:37 p.m., every Tuesday, he would stop outside room 212, an unused classroom converted into storage, and stand there for exactly 60 seconds. He never went in, never unlocked the door, just stood, then left. At 12:16 p.m. sharp every Friday, he walked past the library and tapped a specific ceiling tile with the end of his broom handle. Always the same tile. Why? No one knew. And when the tile was opened, nothing was there. The most unsettling discovery, however, came from a place no one expected: the school yearbooks. A junior named Camille Song, editor of the yearbook club, had been working on a retrospective spread. While digging through editions dating back to the late 90s, she started a side project: find every candid photo where Mr. Elroy appeared, even unintentionally. She found 11, then 19, then 26. He was always in the background. never looking at the camera, never repeated the same hallway twice in those shots, but in every single photo, he wore the same watch on his left wrist, a silver analog timepiece. Simple, no brand name, and always set to 11:11, regardless of the hour the photo was taken. Camille showed the photos to her photography teacher. He said something that sent chills down her spine. That's not just coincidence, that's pattern, intent, almost like he wanted to be found but not too easily. Why would a janitor stand in front of a locked room every Tuesday? Why would he avoid being seen but ensure he was always in the background? Why would he wear a broken watch set to the same time in every photo? The mystery deepened, and with it, so did the realization. Mr. Elroy hadn't simply lived a quiet life. He had been hiding something, and now it was only a matter of time before someone found it. Sometimes the key to someone's truth is hidden in the dust we stopped noticing, or in the lock no one ever bothered to open. It was a Tuesday morning when the janitorial staff began the process of reassigning Mr. Elroy's old locker. Not a hallway locker, but a utility one tucked behind the boiler room on the basement level. It hadn't been touched since the day he died. No one really needed it, no one wanted it, until a new part-time custodian, Malik, requested a spot to store his things. Assistant Principal Ferris gave a nod and handed him a ring of keys. All but one matched to known doors and locks, but the last one, it had no label, just a faded blue tag, handwritten, E31. They didn't know what it opened until someone remembered the old locker. Malik went down alone. The hallway to the boiler room was colder than usual, even though spring had arrived. The air was metallic, and the walls still bore the scent of industrial cleaning solution. There it was, locker E31. It didn't look like much. Scuffed metal, no decoration. The kind of place you'd expect to find a mop, maybe some gloves, maybe a forgotten sandwich. But when Malik turned the key, it didn't open. Not all the way. Something was wedged inside. He called Ferris. She came down. Together they managed to pull the door open, revealing a space much deeper than it should have been, more like a small closet than a locker. And inside were three things. One, a wooden box locked with a brass clasp. No key in sight, but there was a strange engraving on top, a symbol, circular with 4 points intersecting like a compass. Beneath it, the initials WK. Two, a folded jacket, military style, but not American. The patch on the shoulder read K4, the NATO-led peacekeeping force that had operated in Kosovo during the late 1990s. Three, a thick envelope, unsealed. Inside were two black and white photos, yellowed at the edges. Both appeared to be from the 1970s or early 80s. The first showed a man who looked eerily like a younger Mr. Elroy, standing next to a group of children outside a destroyed building. The second was harder to explain. It depicted a formal dinner scene, long table, silverware glinting under chandeliers, but at the center, among the seated dignitaries, was Elroy, clean-shaven, wearing a uniform with no name tag. Behind him stood a woman. Her face was circled in pen. On the back, scrawled in blue ink, "She knew. She always knew." That was the moment Ferris called the police. By noon, the school was buzzing again, not with students, but with investigators, suits and whispers that ran faster than fire. Detectives cordoned off the locker. The box was sent for examination. The photos were scanned, digitized, and cross-referenced. And for the first time since his death, Mr. Elroy became the center of attention. That afternoon, Camille, the yearbook editor, sat with her laptop, staring at the scanned photo of the dinner party. She had used AI facial recognition tools before to tag classmates. Out of curiosity, she uploaded Elroy's image and selected "Search visually similar." What came back made her gasp. The man in the photo was listed in a declassified NATO document as Willem Koenig. a German-born intelligence operative, listed as presumed deceased in 1999. Could it be the same man? Everything pointed to it. The initials, WK, the KF4 jacket, the pattern of behavior, exits, routines, silence. Mr. Elroy wasn't Elroy at all. The police didn't confirm anything publicly, but by the end of the week, a quiet request came from the Department of Defense. And then, as if it had all been some strange dream, the box and the photos disappeared from local custody. Just like that. Gone. But the students remembered. Camille printed out the dinner photo and hung it on the yearbook wall. Underneath, she wrote in pen, "You can mop floors and still carry secrets bigger than the building. Rest easy, Mr. Elroy, or Willem, or whoever you truly were." Some faces vanish with time, others refuse to disappear because they're re-hiding something the world was never meant to find. The woman in the photograph wouldn't leave Camille's mind. Every time she closed her laptop, her face remained serene, elegant, detached. There was nothing obvious about her. No insignia, no badge, no attention-grabbing jewelry or posture. And yet, she dominated the image. There was something about the way she was slightly out of focus and still unmistakably aware of the camera. Camille had grown up around images. Her father was a photographer turned journalist. He taught her to look beyond light and framing, to find the intention in a photo, and this one felt intentional, as if this woman had allowed herself to be captured, knowing it would mean something later. The day after discovering the photograph, Camille tried every modern trick: facial recognition, reverse image search, metadata scanning. Nothing. The file had been scrubbed, not just once, but thoroughly. She had no name, no timestamp metadata, no geolocation coordinates. The dinner scene was high society, tall ceilings, chandeliers, diplomats, table flags. But the only identifying detail was a small gold placard in front of one plate, written in French, "Réservé Comité Spécial." That meant intelligence or military liaison. That meant someone didn't want this photo circulating. And that meant Camille had to dig deeper. She turned to an anonymous Cold War archive forum where amateur historians and former analysts occasionally dropped fragments of the past. Using a burner account, she posted a cleaned-up version of the image with the caption, "Can anyone identify the woman in this 1990s diplomatic dinner photo? She appears alongside known intelligence figures." Most replies were jokes, memes, spam. But 12 hours later, one user responded, "Orpheus47. His message was brief. She was called the Archivist. No public record, no national origin. When names were erased from history, she was often the one holding the pen." Camille's skin prickled. Was this a myth? Some urban legend from the intelligence world? She responded cautiously, asking for clarification. Was he sure? The reply came faster than expected. "There are whispers in old German and British files." She worked behind every major post-Cold War cleanup. Yugoslavia, East Germany, even certain US ops. If she circled herself in that photo, she wanted you to find her. That night, Camille came home late. She hadn't told anyone, not her friends, not even her father, about the online conversations. When she entered her bedroom, everything seemed normal, except for the white envelope on her pillow. It had no stamp, no address, just her name, handwritten in cursive, Camille. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "Don't dig further. He wanted peace in death. Let him have it." Camille froze. No one had been home. No windows broken. No signs of forced entry. Whoever left the letter didn't need to break in. They were allowed in, or they never left a trace. The next morning, she brought the letter to Principal Rourke, still shaking. He read it silently, then slid open his bottom drawer and pulled out two more. Both letters had different handwriting, but the same message: "Don't dig, let him rest." One was dated October 2002, addressed to a Mr. Livingston, a former teacher who left mid-year without explanation. The other, from April 2011, was sent to Ms. Lyda Crenshaw, the former school nurse. She too left quietly, her departure never spoken of. Camille whispered, "Why would anyone care this much?" Rourke's voice dropped. "Because some truths weren't made to survive past their expiration date. And Elroy, he carried something that people paid to keep buried." Camille turned to the only person she trusted unconditionally, her father. Dean Holloway had once been a war correspondent. Kosovo, Sarajevo, Grozny. He knew what it meant to tread on dangerous memories. When she showed him the letter and the photo, he didn't say much, but the way he leaned back, that silence told her everything. He picked up the photo again, looked closer, then said, "I saw her once, briefly in '99 in Belgrade. She wasn't in any official role, but everyone deferred to her. Even generals stepped aside." Together they submitted a Freedom of Information request to NATO and U4 archives. Most were rejected. But one file arrived in a strange way, a low-resolution scan, poorly redacted, with a coded index number and the title, "Support Personnel, Mobile Archival Recovery Units, 1997-2001. In the last paragraph, a name appeared, L. Brauer. Cultural Liaison, Vienna and Belgrade sectors. And there it was, a reference photo. Black and white, smudged but unmistakable. The woman in the dinner photograph. Name, Dr. Lieselotte Brauer. She wasn't a diplomat, she wasn't a secretary. She was a specialist in what the military called information containment. When regimes fell or secrets became inconvenient, her job was to sanitize the records, to close files, seal testimonies, retrieve evidence that might cause embarrassment or instability. She didn't protect people, she protected narratives. So why was she standing behind Willem Koenig? Why was his record so carefully erased? And why was she circling her own face? The next twist came quietly. That Thursday afternoon during spring play rehearsal, the front office phone rang. Secretary Pam answered. The voice on the other end was crisp, female, and carried a faint accent. German but refined. "Is Camille available? Tell her. The archivist is ready to speak." Camille arrived home that evening to find an email in her inbox from an encrypted domain. The subject line read only, "Vienna waits." Attached was a single sentence. "Ask no questions by phone. Meet at 7 p.m., room 204, Old Humanities Wing. No one else." It was signed, L.B. Camille sat still for a long time. Who was this woman really? Why come out of the shadows now? And what part of Elroy's story was still hidden, even after death? She checked the locks, closed her laptop, then pulled the photograph one last time into the light. The circle around Lieselotte Brauer's face almost looked like an invitation. When ghosts speak, they don't shout. They whisper truths the world tried to forget. Room 204 hadn't been used in years. Once a humanities classroom, it had been closed due to asbestos concerns. But the warning signs on the door were faded, and the lock, if there ever was one, had long been broken. Camille stepped inside slowly, her phone off, her footsteps echoing softly against the dusty tile. There was only one desk near the window, and sitting behind it, perfectly upright, was Dr. Lieselotte Brauer. She looked exactly like the photograph, but time had touched her. Her hair was now silver, pulled into a precise chignon. Her skin was pale but taut, with eyes that seemed to measure everything they saw. She didn't stand, didn't smile, only gestured toward the empty chair across from her. "I expected you earlier," she said, her voice carrying a melodic, distant accent. "Punctuality is one of history's most underappreciated virtues." Camille sat, unsure whether to speak first, but Brauer didn't wait. Camille nodded slowly. "I think so. You were called the archivist." Brauer's lips curved slightly. "I am the archivist." The room was silent for a moment. Dust particles floated in the low sunlight. Somewhere down the hall, the metal creak of an old locker echoed like a ghost passing by. Camille finally asked, "Why did you circle your own face?" Brower folded her hands. "Because people forget too easily. We need to remind them where the silence began." She slid a manila folder across the desk. It was unmarked. Old. Inside were 6 black and white photographs. One showed Elroy Koenig, but much younger, standing outside what appeared to be a ruined church. His expression was hard to read, a mix of purpose and exhaustion. Behind him, dozens of people, displaced, grateful, each looking toward him like he was the only reason they were alive. "He wasn't just a janitor," Brower said, her voice growing lower. "He was what your generation might call a cleaner, but not of flaws, of situations." She tapped the photo. "He was embedded unofficially with a small unit, tasked with extracting children from villages caught in ethnic cleansing." Camille's heart pounded. Brower looked away, her expression distant. "More than 100, with knowledge, maps, bribes, disguises. He learned names, dialects, family networks. He negotiated with warlords, pretending to be a driver, or a food courier, or a janitor." Camille stared at the photograph again. Her school's janitor had once smuggled children through front lines, wearing the same quiet, unreadable face he'd worn every day at school. "But why did he end up here?" she asked. "In a school, in Ohio." Brower's answer came without hesitation. "Because guilt doesn't vanish with heroism, and some people..." She leaned forward slightly. "He made a mistake, Camille. One that cost lives. A child he trusted, a boy who, it led him to other survivors, turned out to be a decoy, a trap. An entire shelter was burned. He never forgave himself. A new identity, a quiet job, one where he could still be useful, but never again exposed to the kind of choices that destroyed him." Camille felt her throat tighten. All those years he had smiled at her in the hallways, fixed broken lockers, shoveled snow before anyone arrived, and all that time he was carrying a fire no one could see. "Why now?" she asked. Brower's eyes sharpened, and because they noticed. "The same people who wanted him erased are watching again, and if you keep digging, you'll attract more than my attention." She opened her coat and pulled out a small cassette tape, old, labeled only Koenig, Final, 2005. "He left one last recording. He made me promise to destroy it. I didn't. You may listen to it once, then choose, return to silence or carry the burden forward." Camille stared at the tape like it might burn her fingers. "Why me?" she whispered. Brower's gaze softened, just for a second. "Because you noticed him. One person who sees beyond the dust and the mop and the silence." She stood. The conversation was over. "Room 204 will be locked by morning. The building will forget again." Before she walked out, she turned one last time. "You want to honor him? Don't publish, don't tweet. Live as if you carry someone else's regret." And then she was gone, like a shadow stepping back into the archive. Camille sat alone for a long time. She held the tape in both hands. The weight was tiny, but inside, the voice of a man who had saved more lives than anyone would ever know, and who had never once asked for thanks. If a man tells you who he really is after death, do you believe him? Camille didn't go home right away. She couldn't. She held the cassette in both hands like it might shatter under the wrong touch. It was heavier than plastic, not in mass, but in meaning. Koenig, Final, 2005. Those were the only words written, but they said everything. She drove in silence. No music, no GPS, just the hum of her old Honda Civic and the low thunder of questions pounding in her chest. Her apartment felt too modern for what she was about to do. She lit a candle, turned off the main lights, closed the blinds. Then she pulled out the only cassette player she owned, an old Walkman she kept from a box of her late father's things. It clicked when she pressed play. And then, silence. Not dead air, intentional silence, like the breath before a confession. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. The voice that came through wasn't quite Elroy's. It was younger, sharper, but still him, still quiet, still patient. I'm not making this for anyone in particular. Maybe no one hears it. Maybe the tape warps in some attic. That would be poetic. But just in case, I want someone to know I wasn't always a janitor. I didn't always mop the sins off linoleum floors. There was a pause, and then the story began. In 1994, I worked for something that didn't exist, a branch with no name. We were called facilitators. We didn't fight wars. We cleaned up the messes after them. In Bosnia, I posed as a UN courier. My mission? Extract children from a town about to vanish under artillery and fire. We had 3 days. Camille closed her eyes as the tape hissed. Elroy spoke slowly, like each word had to pass through a lifetime of memory. He told of a small village called Kozarak, where families lived in basements, where mothers dressed their sons as girls so they wouldn't be taken. He described the frost-bitten hills, the burned-out minarets, the smell of fear that had nothing to do with body odor and everything to do with hope dying too slowly. There was a boy. His name was Dario, 12 maybe. He spoke 5 languages and could lie with eyes wide open. He guided us to 3 safe houses. He said they were full of orphans. I trusted him. Too much. On the 3rd day, we entered a trap. They were waiting, not the enemy. Worse, mercenaries, paid to wipe evidence. We got out, but the children didn't. I remember the heat of the fire on my back. I remember Dario screaming, not in fear, in anger. We were tools, and we broke. There was a long pause on the tape, the kind of silence that made Camille's skin crawl. Then his voice returned, quieter now, more fragile. After the war, I asked to be reassigned. No more field work, no more lies. I wanted to serve, to clean something real, and the school, it became a kind of penance. Camille wiped a tear from her cheek. He spoke of the students he watched grow up, the lockers he fixed without being asked, the moments no one saw. A girl in the hallway who cried after failing a test, a boy who punched a wall after his parents divorced, the lost cell phones he returned without judgment. They thought I was invisible, but I was watching, not to judge, just to witness, because that's all I could do now. And then, near the end, he said something Camille would never forget. Every day I cleaned the same hallway, and every day I hoped someone would ask me why I was always looking out the window between classes. No one ever did, until now maybe. There was a click. The tape ended, and with it, the only direct testimony of a man who had saved lives in silence. A man who had scrubbed blood from his conscience with floor wax. Camille sat there for a long time. The candle burned low. The cassette had no more to say, but it had said everything. She looked at her phone. She could post about it, tell the world, expose the truth. But she remembered what Brower said, live as if you carry someone else's regret. So instead, she labeled the cassette Elroy's Window and tucked it in her father's old box. She wouldn't forget, but she wouldn't exploit it either. Some truths aren't meant to go viral, they're meant to go home. You think you know a place until the silence starts speaking. The next morning, the school felt different. Camille arrived early, too early. Not for work, not for responsibility, but for something deeper. The sun hadn't fully broken through the clouds. The building cast long shadows across the damp pavement, and the air carried the kind of chill that didn't come from temperature alone. She had the master keys in her coat pocket, not because she was supposed to, but because Elroy had left them, intentionally or not, In the supply closet she now thought of as his second skin. As she walked the empty halls, her footsteps echoed louder than usual. The posters on the wall, "Respect, persevere, succeed," felt like lies written in permanent marker. She stopped in front of the janitor's office, opened the door. It smelled the same, pine sol and metal, but now it also smelled like absence. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she trusted that she would know when she found it. Elroy's desk was still cluttered. Notebooks, old cleaning logs, spare keys labeled with masking tape. Then tucked beneath a torn box of mop heads, she saw a faded folder marked only with BLVL, basement level. The school didn't have a basement, at least not officially. Camille had always assumed the lowest point was the old boiler room, a place that maintenance visited, but no one else dared to explore. She flipped through the folder, hand-drawn diagrams, scribbled notes, an old blueprint copy from the 70s with red ink crossing out stairwells and penciled-in comments like "Walled over, 1983, unused, no record, access behind panel D12, panel D12. That was in the East Wing, near the old art supply room that hadn't been used in a decade. Her heartbeat picked up. She was moving without thinking now, guided not by logic, but by that invisible thread Elroy had left behind. The East Wing was colder than the rest of the school. Time seemed to have slowed here. The lights flickered weakly. Dust floated like old ghosts in the air. She found panel D12. It wasn't even locked, just a false wall of chipped drywall behind a metal shelving unit. She pulled. It groaned open like a wound. Behind it, a narrow stone stairwell, no light, just a descending tunnel into the forgotten. Camille paused, then flicked on her phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The stairs creaked, but they held. She counted them, 21, then stone, then silence. The room at the bottom was wider than she expected. Not a room, more like a corridor, half storage, half tomb. Dust-coated chairs stacked like barricades, filing cabinets rusted shut, a fallen chalkboard on which someone had once started writing something and never finished. But what caught her eye was the far wall. Names, hundreds of names, some painted, some etched, some scratched with something sharp and desperate, all arranged in a strange, loose pattern, like a constellation of lives long buried. She stepped closer. Dario. There it was, the name from the tape, clear as day, and below it, dozens of others. Some had dates, some had symbols next to them, stars, question marks, crosses. All of them were written in different handwriting. Elroy hadn't done this alone. There were notes too. A dusty clipboard sealed in plastic. She opened it carefully. Inside, Operation Orchard Seed. Report. 47 of 87 relocated, others status unknown. Names memorialized below. If this is ever found, let it be known, these names were real, they mattered. Camille stood frozen. Operation, relocated, memorialized. This wasn't just Elroy's shame, it was his shrine, his unfinished apology, his hidden garden of memory, where each name had once had a face, a laugh, a story, lost to a war no one in this school would ever read about in textbooks. Her fingers trembled as she reached the last corner of the wall. There, in the smallest handwriting, almost invisible, was one more name, Koenig. Below it, just two words, still here. The tears came suddenly, without permission, because that's what it meant, didn't it? Elroy had put himself among them, not above, not outside, but with them. He hadn't been cleaning a school. He'd been atoning in silence. Each mop stroke was a prayer, each hallway pass, an act of quiet penance. She took photos, not to share, just to remember. Then she turned to leave and stopped. On the table near the door, an old tape recorder. A second cassette, unlabeled. She picked it up, heart racing, breath uneven, and smiled. He had more to say. They were just names on a wall, until one of them started speaking. Camille sat in her car, in the school's empty parking lot, the second cassette in her hand. The air was still, her breath fogging the windshield. It was early evening now, but the sky looked like dusk had been extended. Heavy clouds hung low, muting the world. She stared at the tape for a long time before sliding it into her old Walkman, the same one her dad had given her when she was 13. She pressed play. Tape begins. Elroy's voice, quieter, older. If you found the wall, then you already know more than anyone else ever will. Good. There were 87 names, children. Not all made it. Some did. Some vanished. Some became shadows like me. You've probably seen the word orchard seed. Sounds pretty, doesn't it? It wasn't. It was a program, a relocation, a lie dressed up in rescue. People like me. We were tools. We got them out, yes, but we also buried the truth to survive. And now I clean floors and erase gum from desks because it's the only penance I understood. Camille leaned her head back against the seat, eyes closed, listening as his voice continued. The more he spoke, the more it sounded like a confession, not of guilt, but of grief. There was one boy, Dario. I mentioned him before. He was the youngest I ever moved, 5 years old. He had this toy, a red plastic airplane. Wouldn't let it go, even when we crossed that border. He used to say, "When I grow up, I'll fly back and bring everyone else with me." I buried that plane in my backyard when I heard he didn't make it. I've never flown since. The tape clicked softly, then restarted with a slight shuffle, a second recording clearly from a different day. You're probably wondering what this has to do with this school, this town. It's all connected. This place, it was a safe house in the 80s. They retrofitted the boiler room as a staging ground. The names on that wall, many of them were here, not as students, as ghosts passing through. I stayed, not just because I didn't have anywhere else to go, but because someone had to remember. The tape hissed for a moment. Camille could hear his breath, shaky, slower than before. My name isn't Elroy Koenig. That was assigned to me in 1991. My real name is Yusuf El Khalid. I was one of them. Relocated, rebranded, rewritten. But I escaped twice, first from a war, then from what they tried to make me forget. This school gave me a name, and then I gave it back something real, memory. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope someone keeps telling their stories. The tape clicked. Silence. Camille sat there for nearly an hour. The tape long stopped, the world around her untouched. Yusuf, Elroy, not a janitor, a witness, not a ghost, a keeper of them. Later that night, she returned to the wall of names. With a notebook, a flashlight, and the weight of something sacred, she copied each name, one by one, hands cramping, eyes blurring, until every single one lived again on paper. At the bottom of the last page, she wrote, Yusuf El Khalid, witness, protector, memory bearer. And beneath it, a quote from the tape. Someone had to remember. The next morning, she went to Principal Adebayo's office. She placed the folder with the copied names on his desk, along with the cassette. At first, he thought it was a prank. Then he read the cover page. The Forgotten Children of Orchard Seed. A record kept by Elroy Koenig. Real name, Yusuf El Khalid. His face changed. He cancelled all his meetings and listened. By the end of that day, a quiet ripple had moved through the school. The custodial closet was sealed for now. The east wing was quietly roped off. And Camille, she started writing. A blog at first, then a local op-ed, then calls from journalists. But she didn't sell the story. She told it, exactly as it was, without drama, without exaggeration, just truth. And slowly, people began remembering Elroy, not just as the man who cleaned gum off lockers, but as the one who never forgot anyone. She also contacted a local refugee archive. When they asked her if she had any documentation, she sent them the names, the tapes, and the blueprint. She included a note. They weren't ghosts, they were children. Now, they're history. A month later, a historian from the state university visited the site. He asked Camille to take him to the basement. She hesitated, then said, "I'll take you, but we won't speak when we're down there. Not out of superstition, but out of respect." And so, they entered in silence. As the flashlight beams moved across the wall of names, the historian whispered, "I can't believe something like this was hidden for so long." Camille replied softly, "That's the thing about hidden stories. Someone always knew. They were just waiting to be heard." One name haunted her more than the rest: Dario, the boy with the red airplane. Camille couldn't stop thinking about the boy. Dario. The name had echoed through Elroy's second tape with a kind of reverence. He wasn't just another story in the dark. He was hope. Small, fragile, innocent hope, the kind that had no right to survive, yet somehow did, even if only in memory. And the image stuck. A 5-year-old boy gripping a red plastic airplane, whispering promises of flight and return. It felt symbolic, maybe even metaphorical. But Camille didn't think it was. She believed Dario was real, and something about that name pulled at her, as if her hands were meant to carry the part of his story Elroy could not. That week, she visited the local library archives every evening after school. She scanned newspaper records from the late 1980s and early 90s. She searched for refugee resettlement data, foster care reports, missing children logs, anything connected to Orchard Seed, or even children named Dario. There were dozens, hundreds, but one stood out. A newspaper article from 1989, published in a town just 2 counties away. The headline read, "Mysterious child appears near abandoned train yard, speaks only Spanish." It was a short piece. The child, approximately 5 years old, had been found wandering barefoot, clutching a red toy airplane, dehydrated but unharmed, no identification. He didn't speak English. He gave his name only once to a local nurse, Dario. After that, he stopped speaking altogether. The article ended with a line that chilled her. "Child has been placed in foster care pending further investigation." That was it. No follow-up, no adoption notice, no mention again, just a little boy and silence. Camille's heart raced. She made copies of the article, printed maps of the area, and began calling agencies. But 35 years had passed. Records were lost. Case files were sealed. Names had changed. Until one social worker, a woman named Sandra, now retired, remembered not the article, not the case, but the boy. "Dario," Sandra said over the phone. "That name, I haven't heard it in decades." "You remember him?" Camille asked. "He was so quiet, never cried, never asked for anything, just held that little red airplane." "Do you know what happened to him?" Sandra hesitated. "He didn't stay long. A man came one day, said he was from an embassy, showed papers, credentials, took him away, said he had family. Was that true? We believed it was. But something felt wrong. I always wondered, did he leave anything behind? Just the toy plane? I kept it actually, I don't know why." Camille drove 2 hours the next day to Sandra S. home, a small cottage near a wooded trail. Sandra, now in her 70s, had been waiting on the porch with a cardboard box on her lap. They drank tea, spoke gently, and when the time felt right, Sandra handed her the box. Inside was the red plastic airplane, faded, scratched, but intact. Camille held it with trembling hands. Elroy's voice echoed in her memory. "I buried that plane in my backyard when I heard he didn't make it." But here it was, not buried, not forgotten, carried by fate or guilt or love until it returned to hands that would remember. Camille asked Sandra for permission to take the toy with her. Sandra nodded. "I think it's been waiting for you." That evening, back home, Camille placed the airplane on her desk. It felt like an artifact, not just of a boy, but of a promise. She pulled out Elroy's tapes again. And realized something, a detail that hadn't struck her before. Elroy had said, "I heard he didn't make it." But that didn't mean it was true. He hadn't seen Dario's end. He had only heard, and likely from the same broken chain of voices that had hidden every other part of their story. So what if Dario had survived? What if he had grown up? What if he was out there now, living under another name, another face, carrying memories he didn't understand? And what if he remembered the plane? Camille began searching again, but now with more specific questions. She posted on message boards, contacted refugee advocacy groups, emailed journalists who had covered human rights migration in the 1990s, and in a long-forgotten online forum, tucked in a thread about displaced children, she found something. A comment. Just one line. Written 6 months ago. By a user named MemoryWing88. "Does anyone else remember being on a train with no windows holding a red airplane?" Her breath caught. She clicked the profile. It was barely filled out. But the user had left an email contact. She wrote immediately. The response came 3 days later. Subject line, "I think we need to talk." They arranged a video call. Camille sat, nervously tapping the airplane on the desk in front of her. The screen flickered on. A man appeared, late 30s, dark eyes, quiet presence. Behind him, a shelf of books, a single framed photo, and on the wall, a painting of a child holding a red airplane. His voice was gentle. "You have it?" "Yes," Camille said, lifting the toy into view. His eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" She told him. "The school, the tapes, Yusuf, everything." When she finished, the man sat back, eyes shimmering. "I always wondered if he made it, if he remembered me." "He did," Camille said softly. "He remembered you." And in that quiet exchange, the ghost of a boy became a man. The story became whole. And the airplane flew again. He was never just the janitor. He was the last witness, and the one who chose to remember. The school felt different now. The floors still shined. The clock still ticked. Children still ran through the halls with backpacks flapping and voices rising toward the ceilings. It wasn't just the absence of Elroy Thompson, the old janitor with his quiet eyes and slow, deliberate steps. It was the presence of something else, a weight that had finally risen from beneath the floorboards. Camille stood outside the old maintenance shed where it had all started. The sun was setting behind her, casting long shadows across the grass. She held the red airplane in one hand. It contained the digitized tapes, the journal transcripts, the documents she had uncovered, the story of Dario, the tapes of the train, everything. She wasn't sure what to do with it. Part of her wanted to upload it all to the internet, to tell the world the truth. Was the world ready to hear it? Weeks earlier, she and Dario, whose real name was now Daniel Herrera, had met in person. They'd walked the same path Elroy used to sweep every morning. Daniel had stood silently in the middle of the school hallway, eyes scanning the ceiling tiles, the lockers, the faded motivational posters. "I don't remember this place," he had said, "but I remember him." Daniel's voice trembled. "He did," Camille nodded. "He never stopped hoping you made it. He saved my life." That night, they sat in the classroom where Camille had first found the box of tapes. They listened to the final recording together. Elroy's voice was slower than usual. But there was something else in it too. Peace. But a human. If you're listening to this, then maybe someone cared enough to look. Maybe someone didn't stop at the broom closet. If so, thank you. I'm not proud of all I've done. I cleaned floors while they cleaned memories, but I remembered what they tried to forget. I couldn't let those stories die beneath tile and dust. Each night, I mopped over the ghosts, and each night, I whispered their names into the dark. Some people think janitors just clean up messes, but some of us, we keep what the world throws away. If you're the one holding this, then it's your turn now." When the tape ended, neither of them spoke for a long time. Daniel stared at the red airplane in Camille's hand. "What do we do now?" he asked. The weeks that followed were a quiet storm. They consulted human rights organizations, former investigators, retired journalists. Not a legal one. Those doors had long closed. 1 month later, a small exhibition opened at the local history museum. It was modest, just one room. First out of curiosity, then out of silence, then out of grief. The exhibit was called "The Ones We Almost Forgot." It featured a school janitor's uniform, faded and patched, a map of train routes that never officially existed, a small recorder with worn buttons, a row of ID badges with missing names, and at the center, encased in glass, the red airplane. People cried there. People stood quietly, reading transcripts and looking at photos. Some left notes, others left toys. One woman left a folded drawing of a train filled with children and flowers, with a single word written in crayon: home. Camille visited the exhibit often. She never stayed long, but each time she went, she saw someone different. Someone older or younger, someone who looked like they had come to remember or to heal. And sometimes she saw janitors, men and women in faded uniforms, standing quietly, looking, as if to say, "We were here too." Daniel began volunteering with a group that helps reconnect displaced children with their families. He gave talks at schools, never sensational. At the end of each session, he would hold up the little red plane and ask, "What do you think this is?" Kids would shout, "A toy, a plane, a memory." He would smile and say, as for Camille, she stayed at the school. She took over the history department, redecorated her classroom, but left one shelf empty. On it, she placed a framed photo of Elroy Thompson, broom in one hand, soft smile on his face, and a plaque beneath it that read, "The Keeper of Stories." She still heard his voice sometimes when the halls were quiet, when the sun hit the windows just right, when dust danced in the light and everything felt still. And every now and then a new student would ask, and Camille would sit them down and say, "Let me tell you a story." Because that's what Elroy left behind. Not just a mystery, not just a secret, but a story. And stories, when kept, when passed on, don't die, they fly. Conclusion du video, the keeper of stories, cum CTA. We often walk past people, never wondering what stories they carry. We assume silence means simplicity, that uniforms define identity. But sometimes, the quietest among us are the ones holding the loudest truths. Elroy Thompson didn't ask to be remembered. He simply refused to forget, and now it's our turn. If this story moved you, share it, not just online, but with someone you love. Let's honor those who are no longer here to speak by being the ones who still can. Subscribe to Hidden Past for more real stories that reveal the extraordinary hidden behind the ordinary. Who are the people we overlook, and what stories are we missing?